and welcome to the show. I'm Jawad Tehami. In today's show, we are going to take up for discussion two important developments. The first one relates to the landmark Supreme Court's verdict regarding the allocation of reserved seats for the Sunni Ittihad Council, overturning already a given decision by the Peshawar High Court based on the decision which was made by the Election Commission of Pakistan. Also entitling Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf for the reserved seats for women and minorities in the National Assembly also. There have been reactions as far as the government and the PMLN leadership is concerned. We saw the Law Minister, Azam Nazir Abtarid, making a very important presser in this particular regard, also talking about to the question of jurisdiction regarding the Supreme Court, regarding the proceeding of this particular matter. Also, when we talk about Prime Minister's advisor, Mr. Rana Sanaullah, he also made an important presser. He also highlighted some important aspects as to what exactly happened regarding the proceedings of the Supreme Court as far as the allocation of these reserved seats is concerned. We'll definitely be taking our esteemed panel of guests online regarding the discussion on this particular matter. In the second segment of the show, there is another development. As we have seen in the recent past, there have been multiple reports on the part of the international organization, especially the United Nations, when it comes to the situation in Afghanistan, especially post-international troops withdrawal and the takeover of Afghanistan by the Afghan Taliban that happened to be the de facto authorities or the interim authorities, and they had the international commitment of not allowing the Afghan soil to be used for any terror activity by any militant outfit or a terrorist organization. In another new report by the UN monitoring team regarding the situation in Afghanistan, it is said, which vindicates Pakistan's long-held stance, especially since the Kabul takeover by the Taliban back in 2021, that Band Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is the largest terrorist group that is operating from the Afghan soil. This particular report also talks about the strength of this particular band outfit, also talks about the kind of support it gets from. Where that support comes from, we'll be talking about that into the second segment. Let's begin with the first one regarding this Supreme Court's verdict regarding the allocation of reserved seats for Sunni Ittihad Council. Now, a 13-member bench of the Supreme Court, of course, headed by Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Qazi Faiz Isa, gave this particular majority verdict with 8-5. Also, as I have already mentioned, there has been a reaction by the Law Minister also regarding as to the jurisdiction of this particular on this particular matter of the Supreme Court and the kind of relief that has been given, that has been talked about by Mr. Rana Sanaullah. Let me quickly bring in our esteemed panel of guests who are joining us online. On Skype, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Niaz Mutaza. He is political analyst. Dr. Mutaza, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also, on Skype, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Ali Rashidi, spokesperson Sindh government. He is the leader of Pakistan People's Party. Mr. Rashid, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. On the phone line at the same time, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Munib Qadir. He is legal expert. Mr. Qadir, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Mr. Munib Qadir. When we talk about this particular verdict, the main takeaways, I just want you to shed a bit of light regarding the key takeaways of this particular verdict by the Supreme Court of Pakistan as to, firstly, talking about the entitlement of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf for the reserved seats of minorities and women. What's your understanding of that, sir? Mr. Qadir, can you hear me, please? I think, unfortunately, we are having a little bit of technical distortion over here. We are unable to connect to Mr. Munib Qadir. As soon as we reconnect to him, we'll try to take his understanding as to what he takes away from this particular verdict by the Supreme Court regarding entitlement of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf on women and minority reserved seats. Mr. Niaz Mutaza, how are you looking at this particular verdict by the Supreme Court, and what sort of a significance at this point in time do you think it holds?
Well, of course, I'm not a lawyer, so I cannot go into, very detailed legal technicalities. But, if I look at it from a common sense point of view, common, justice principles, the verdict does make a lot of sense to me. And let's remember that, the huge amount of consensus within the bench. Out of 13 judges, 11 of the judges agreed on the fact that the Election Commission of Pakistan misinterpreted the January 13th verdict, and that these seats cannot be allocated to other parties. All 11 of them recognize that the PTI should be treated as a valid political party within the parliament, even though Election Commission had not allowed it to take part in the elections. And then, there are some differences. 3 of the 11 judges are less, generous in terms of, how many seats the PTI would be able to get, whereas the majority 8 judges have been a little more generous. But in the, broader sense of things, I think 11 judges do agree with, the broader issue that, there was an unfair treatment of the PTI, and there needs to be a compensation of that. So overall, I think it's a good verdict. It's a large political party. It's a popular political party, and it should not be kept out of the parliament on technicalities and minor points. So all in all, I personally welcome the verdict.
Right, let me proceed towards Mr. Rashid. Mr. Rashid, when we talk about this particular verdict, what is your understanding? Do you have similar concerns as we have seen the reservations which have been expressed in 2 very important presses? Firstly, by the Law Minister, Mr. Azam Nazir Tarar himself, and also the political advisor to Prime Minister, Mr. Rana Sanaullah.
Thank you for having me on your show today. I would like to say it was a surprising judgment. It was, I think, a surprise to everyone, including PTI, because PTI itself had not gone to court for this case. The Sunni Ittihad Council had gone, and they were demanding that by law, the independents should be able to. Now, the question of law was not if PTI should get the seats or not. The question of law was that Sunni Ittihad Council, a party which has not contested elections itself and does not have a single seat itself in the parliament, can the candidates, independent candidates, join? That was the question at law. But surprisingly, with the turn of events, the judges and the majority of the judges have decided that the seats, the independents should be allowed to join PTI, because earlier the verdict of Election Commission wasn't fair or was not correct, which is very surprising to everybody, I'm guessing. Well, like it or not, that's the verdict, and I think all political stakeholders will have to accept it and deal with it, because we are law-abiding, we want to go by that. But now the
right, Mr. Rashid,
cabinet.
I see your pardon for the interjection over here. When you specifically talk of this judgment being surprising, so does this surprise hold until only the detailed verdict by the Supreme Court is declared? Perhaps that's element of surprise might go away after the reasons or the qualifications of what the Supreme Court, honorable judges of the Supreme Court, had deemed should be given that kind of relief in this particular instance now.
Perhaps. I think once once we do have the detailed verdict, things might be more clear, and we'll be in a better position to discuss the merits of the case. But that being said, as I said, that PTI never went to court. It was the Sunni Ittihad Council which had gone, and they were demanding that independent seats, the reserved seats, should be given to them, since those people have joined the Sunni Ittihad Council, which is a political party. So now the question was that such a party, can it get reserved seats? What I'm saying is the courts went above and beyond to give PTI this benefit, which was given to them. I'm sure there must be some legal merits to that, which we'll find out in the detailed judgment. But that being said, I think the current government, the federal government, has the opportunity and the choice to file for a judicial review to review this decision. I don't know if they'll go ahead with that. That's for the federal cabinet to decide. But it does make things a bit tricky, because now the federal government will lose its 2/3 majority. The government is still there because the numbers are full. By PTI getting these seats, they will not be the simple majority or the majority of the coalition partners the same. But yes, it is questionable because the federal government will lose 2/3 majority to make constitutional amendments. And one wonders if this was more of a case where you want to dish out justice, or it was because there was some discussion regarding the Chief Justice extension, which the amendments could have been made. So a lot of things are there. And that being said, I think it's too soon to have a detailed discussion on it. But yeah, nonetheless, it was surprising.
Right, let me proceed towards Mr. Munib Qadir. Mr. Qadir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so Mr. Qadir, now specifically talking about that presser that was made by the Minister of Law and Justice, Mr. Azam Nazir Tarar, talking about the question of jurisdiction of the Supreme Court regarding this particular matter. What's your understanding regarding that? When we talk about the question of jurisdiction, does it hold as has been expressed by the Law Minister himself?
Well, the law has been clear, and that too for years, that independents do not really get reserved seats. Now, what appears to be the case here is that the Supreme Court, actually the majority of Supreme Court, has gone out of its way to ensure that the PTI secures a victory. This is the kind of a decision which might appear to be popular, and I can see that, majority of the public, not just PTI supporters, but the majority of the public are very much in favor of what the Supreme Court has decided. But the legality of that decision, issues relating to jurisdiction that you've just talked about, that the Law Minister has talked about, when we focus on that, there are lots of questions and I think even loopholes left in today's Supreme Court decision, because as has been rightly pointed out by my co-panelists, that the complaint was brought by Sunni Ittihad Council, which itself had never contested that election. Sunni Ittihad Council does not even allow for non-Muslims to be part of, its party under their own constitution. And for them to be allocated reserve seats for religious minorities, that is another question mark. And I wonder who really won the case. Was it PTI? Was it SIC? Both of them? But all in all, it appears that it's the PTI which is the beneficiary of today's judgment, because the benefit of doubt has been tilted so much in PTI's favor that even those candidates who had declared themselves to be independent, even they have been termed as PTI candidates just for the reason that they considered themselves to be affiliated with PTI. So this is the extent of the leeway which has been given to this particular political party by the Supreme Court. And I think that the Supreme Court was really concerned about seeing to be politically correct rather than legally correct. And it's pretty certain, in my estimation at least, it appears that the government, the coalition government, is going to file a review petition in the Supreme Court according to the Practice and Procedures Act.
Right, Mr. Qadir, I'll come back to you to take your understanding as to what could be the prospects when we talk about this legal option once the cabinet decides, as already mentioned by Mr. Rana Sanaullah, of filing a review petition in the apex court. Mr. Niaz Mutaza, when we talk about the question of jurisdiction here regarding this particular matter, as already highlighted by the Law Minister, also in the kind of relief that has been given to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, it was also mentioned while we were hearing the pronouncement of the judgment, the Chief Justice saying neither the candidate from the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf challenged that particular decision of Election Commission of Pakistan. So the question arises here, what the other political parties, including PMLN and PPP, are saying, that how a relief can be granted to someone who didn't actually ask for it.
Well, a jurisdiction, what do they mean that the Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction on that matter? Did they raise that point during the hearings? I've been following, the hearing. I don't remember even once the government saying that the Supreme Court does not have jurisdiction on this case and it should not hear it. Why should the Supreme Court lack jurisdiction if the Peshawar High Court has given a verdict on it? The next step, of course, is that, the case goes to the Supreme Court. So that's one point about jurisdiction. The other thing is, whether a party which has not been part of the case, can that benefit as a spillover effect? Yes, we've seen that in other cases as well, that, the Supreme Court or whoever there is, whichever court it is, they give a verdict, and it goes beyond benefiting the immediate party. It can, benefit other parties as well. I remember, the 62 1F case verdict that had been given. A lot of people benefited from it, which were not even part of, that case. So I think the Supreme Court has taken a broader look at, the whole situation.
So when we, I seek your pardon to interject over here. When we talk about the question of jurisdiction in terms which has been expressed by Law Minister, is overstepping that jurisdiction in this particular matter. And that particularly alludes to the fact that perhaps the relief has been given to the one who didn't ask for it.
Is there a law which says that nobody else can benefit? Is there a clear law which says that if we are talking about literalism, let's apply literalism here as well? Is there a specific law which says that nobody else can benefit from a court jurisdiction, court verdict? And as I said, there are several examples where people who were not part of the case did get to benefit from different court verdicts. So I don't see much of a point there.
Right, let me take this point to Mr. Qadir. Mr. Qadir, is there anything in the law that if the main petitioner or the person who has filed the plea in a certain court of law, if the relief is given to some other party, what does the law say about that?
Well, the thing is that it's a very fundamental feature of any case which takes place in the courts of law, that the party which is seeking a remedy is the one which should be at the center of attention. What's happened today in Supreme Court's judgment is that the particular political party, PTI, was not the aggrieved party in the sense that they had not petitioned the court. And so that does raise questions, and very legitimate questions, as to how the Supreme Court could have declared a verdict benefiting benefiting a group of people who are not even party to the case. It did affect PTI, what the SIC had wanted to seek from the Supreme Court, but the PTI had not gone directly to the court in this particular instance. So there is that question. But, unfortunately or fortunately, this has been a practice for Pakistan Supreme Court for decades now. And they have been doing this. And every single time I've raised question over how they can, attach issues or parties to a particular case where those issues or parties are not even at the center of the legal dispute or questions being asked. Having said that, it's also very interesting that the Supreme Court judgment focuses a lot on the fact that even without a common symbol, PTI had the status of a political party. I mean, this was undisputed. The court did not really need to emphasize upon this. This everybody had known, even PTI's political opponents had known, that despite not having the bat symbol, they were still considered to be party. But the question was, and the question should have been mostly, that without a common symbol, could they have contested election as a party? To which I understand that the Supreme Court has responded in the affirmative, but how exactly? How did they come to that conclusion?
The allocation of the election symbol, let me take this point to Mr. Rashid. Mr. Rashid, the verdict declared regarding this particular allocation of symbol, let me quote that excerpt: the lack or denial of an election symbol does not in any manner affect the constitutional and legal rights of political party to participate in an election, whether general or by, and to field candidates, and the Commission is under a constitutional duty to act and construe and apply all statutory provisions accordingly, unquote. Your analysis and understanding regarding this particular specific excerpt from the judgment.
the fact that PTI was still being considered as a political party. But at the same time, if you read the law, it says that any party which does not have an election symbol cannot get reserved seats. That's also something which the law says, which is conflicting, but that's the law. But again, what I'll come back to, I'm not going to get into the technicalities of law here, the merits or demerits, but I'll tell you something. This case was a bit different because it was being aired live. So everybody could actually see the arguments being placed by the lawyers and by the opposition, by the defense, by the Attorney General, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to draw your attention to is the fact that here, when you actually look at the legal proceedings and the case proceedings, it was not a discussion about the fact if PTI should get these seats or not. PTI was not even in the scene. The whole point was that Sunni Ittihad Council was pleading their case, and they were saying that we are deserving, and since these independent candidates have joined us, we should get the reserve seats. And then the opposition, which were opposing them, was saying it's not part of their manifesto. They don't even consider minorities or women. That they don't want to give them seats. So the entire discussion was on a different tangent. What I'm saying is it was just surprising that out of the blue, the verdict which came went out of the way to just bless PTI with these seats, when PTI was not even in the equation.
Mr. Rashid, your point is well taken. Unfortunately, we're short of time. Your quick last one-sentence comment as to any expectation, any hopes when you talk about the cabinet deciding to put the matter in a review petition before the apex court?
I feel everything should be dealt with constitutionally, legally, and I think our friends from the PTI who like to oppose things should be a bit relaxed now that the courts are dishing out justice in anybody's favor. So we should remain politically stable so we don't hamper the economy, and we deal with our business in a civilized manner, not go crazy and go out on the streets.
Of any different sort of a verdict in case the cabinet decides to put the matter before the apex court once again in the form of a review petition?
I think that the chances of this decision being overturned on review are high because unfortunately for PTI and the supporters, even though many of them argue that, fine legal technical points should not be looked at very scrupulously, that's the whole point of the law itself. The law is all about technicalities, and it's the technicalities which have not been addressed in the Supreme Court's verdict of today. And it's those very technicalities on the basis of which I do believe that the federal government has a very good chance of basing their review petition on to contend this particular judgment upon. So I think time is going to tell. Time will tell what's happened.
Right, Mr. Munib Qadir, legal expert, joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much for taking time out. Mr. Ali Rashid, spokesperson, Sindh Government and leader of Pakistan People's Party, thank you very much for your time. Dr. Niaz Mutaza joining us on Skype, a political analyst. Thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of the first segment of the show. In the second, we'll talk about that very report by the United Nations Sanctions Monitoring Committee regarding as to the Taliban, the connection between Afghan Taliban and Banned Tehreek-e-Taliban. Banned Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan being the largest terrorist group operating from the Afghan soil, and what kind of support and where that support is coming from. We'll be taking analysis on that important development. For that, stay tuned. Banned Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan remains to be an absolute red line for Pakistan. It's been carrying out heinous terrorist attacks inside Pakistani territory, using Afghan soil as the launch pad, having safe havens over there, despite that international commitment of the Afghan Taliban that they won't allow any terrorist outfit to operate from there. There had been repeated violations. There hadn't been any concrete actions when it comes to Banned Tehreek-e-Taliban, when it comes to Afghan Taliban of fulfilling their commitment. And TTP had been posing a serious threat to Pakistan's security, stability, and been carrying out those terrorist attacks. Pakistani authorities have been sharing that irrefutable evidence with the Afghan authorities, but there has been a pattern of denial on the part of the Afghan authorities, rather than taking the responsibility, fulfilling that international commitment. It had been trying to point fingers back at Pakistan regarding the matter of banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, there is a report by the United Nations Sanctions Monitoring Committee as to the strength of the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, also which happens to be around 6,000 to 6,500 fighters, and where it is getting that support from the Afghan Taliban. Also other terror factions, including the affiliates of Al-Qaeda. This is not a new report. This is supplementing those reports which have already been released by the United Nations and its subsidiary divisions. This is a long-held stance since the international troops withdrawal back in 2021 by Pakistani authorities that banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan has been operating from the Afghan soil and carrying out those terrorist activities here in Pakistan. Now, let me quote a couple of excerpts from this particular 15th report of the ISIL, Daesh and Al-Qaeda Taliban monitoring team that has been submitted to the United Nations Security Council, which says the Taliban do not conceive of TTP as a terrorist group. The bonds are close and the debt owed to TTP significant. TTP continues to operate at significant scale in Afghanistan and to conduct terrorist operations into Pakistan from there, often utilizing Afghans. TTP has intensified attacks against Pakistan, significantly increasing from 573 in 2021 to 715 in 2022 and 1,210 in 2023, with the trend continuing in 2024. Also, let me quickly bring in our esteemed panel of guests to talk about this important pressing issue. In the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Tughral Yamin. He is defense analyst. Dr. Yamin, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. On the phone line, at the same time, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Adnan Sarwar, is foreign affairs expert. Dr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Yamin, this particular report is not the first one. There have been multiple reports already regarding the kind of safe havens banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan enjoy on the Afghan soil, the kind of support they've been getting from the terrorist outfits from there also. This report also talks about that particular support they're getting from Afghan Taliban. What's your understanding? We've talked at length in a number of shows regarding as to whether it's the question of will or the capacity of the Afghan Taliban. Is there any third dimension to that also?
I don't think so. Basically, the Afghan Taliban think that they owe a debt of gratitude to the Pakistani Taliban, and that's why they are unwilling to stop their activities on their soil. I think the government should now change the narrative. We have been talking about Afghan Taliban and Pakistani Taliban as if they are two separate entities, and I think there was a reason behind that. We thought that what the Afghan Taliban were doing was a genuine freedom struggle against foreign forces, and what the Pakistani Taliban or the so-called Pakistani Taliban were doing was illicit activity. But now it is a known fact that they are an extension of the Afghan Taliban. So I think it's high time that we stop calling them Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. They are not Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, they are Tehrik-e-Taliban anti-Pakistan, because their activities are anti-state, their activities are anti-Pakistan. So I think at the level of narrative building, we should stop calling them Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. They are very much part and parcel of the Afghan Taliban. Unfortunately, whether we consider the Taliban government legit and or licit, irrespective of that fundamental question, these people have their support. They have been provided, in the report it says, they have been provided NATO grade weapons, and the very worrisome thing in that is that they have night vision devices. So this certainly gives them an edge of fighting at night. Otherwise, ragtag guerrillas cannot operate at night. They don't have night vision devices. These people have night vision devices, and they have got good weapon systems. They are not ordinary rifles. They are rifles which were used, or weapons or guns which had been used by the American forces, the NATO forces. So this is worrisome, and they are being provided, the arsenals have been provided to them by the Afghan Taliban. So I think the distinction should stop forthwith.
NATO caliber weapons being provided, they're available at the hands of militant outfits or banned Tehrik-e-Taliban. Pakistan, let's put it that way. Tehrik-e-Taliban, anti-Pakistan, that is what you are suggesting, right? Let's put it that way, banned Tehrik-e-Taliban, Pakistan. So, okay. So the availability of those weapons, they were the leftover after the international troops were so rather, it gives them an edge when it comes to fighting at night, night vision goggles. Who has the responsibility at this point in time? We understand for a fact that they were left here during that hasty withdrawal. During that hasty withdrawal. What you just said, was it on purpose? So who was the responsibility?
It was the responsibility of the new government that they should have kept those weapons safe and not allowed any other irregular forces to lay hands on them. It was their responsibility, and we have had 3 rounds of Doha talks, and this time the Afghan Taliban were also there. And the first Doha talks, in which Mullah Baradar took part, an explicit guarantee was given that the Afghan soil would not be used by parties, third parties, for operations against other countries, including Pakistan. And this is, I think, a breach of trust, violation of that agreement.
So you are of the view, Dr. Yamin, I see your partner, unfortunately we're short of time. I have to cover a couple of more aspects. Let me proceed towards Dr. Adnan Sarwar Khan. He's foreign affairs expert joining us on the phone line. Dr. Khan, when we talk about this availability of the NATO caliber weapons to the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, Mr. Dr. Yamin is of the view that primarily it was the responsibility of the interim Afghan government to have that particular control over the leftover NATO caliber weapons after that hasty withdrawal of the international troops. Now, do you also agree with this point? Was it primarily the responsibility of the de facto authorities in Afghanistan, or was it the primary responsibility of the international troops who shouldn't have left those weapons at all here?
Yes, I'm fully in agreement with the Honorable Mr. Tughral Yamin, Dr. Tughral Yamin. In fact, you see, the point is that, number one, I will start rather from this point also, that the United States, while it was negotiating with the defunct Taliban at Doha, should have helped the Afghan troops in resisting those Taliban which were returning back. Number two, that they should have not made their withdrawal very hasty and in a panic-like manner, leaving behind very deadly weapons of the NATO high-quality type. And then thirdly, indeed, if at all they were not able to take them with them to the United States or the NATO headquarters, at least the interim government should have taken care that those weapons should not fall into the hands of the TTP or the other militant groups. So, in fact, you see, there was this triple kind of irresponsibility by these entities that I've just told you. And now the point is also that since the coming into power of Taliban 2.0, Pakistan and the rest of the other countries were all expecting that the terrorist attacks from the soil of Afghanistan into Pakistan particularly, and into the rest of the other countries, particularly Tajikistan, etc., the IS Khorasan group would significantly decrease, but that didn't happen, to the great disappointment of all of us. And in fact, you see, now people are regretting that, well, the Ashraf Ghani government was a better one. And now when some operation is launched by the Pakistani law enforcing agencies and the Pak army here in Pakistan's tribal areas and rest of the areas, they go back and have a safe haven there. Earlier on, at least NATO and the last government forces would tackle them then to some extent. So now, I mean, it has been said that they are now ideological. They were ideological brothers. And I agree with the Tughral Sahab that now it must be called as Pakistan Taliban, anti-Pakistan Tehrik-e-Taliban. Rather, I would say, if I am allowed to say, that it is now terrorist Taliban anti-Pakistan group. Terrorist Taliban anti-Pakistan group. I'll even say like that. So the point is that now,
Dr. Khan, your point is well taken. Now, when we specifically, you already talked about after that hasty withdrawal, there was expectation from the Afghan Taliban, but as you in your earlier take talked about, referred to that Ashraf Ghani's government deeming it better as compared to Taliban 2.0 version. Now, we've been disappointed. There has been a resurgence of terrorism here in Pakistan. The NATO caliber weapons left over due to that hasty withdrawal at the hands of the terrorist outfits and Afghan Taliban not taking control of that. Now the situation is pretty much clear. The disappointment, the availability of NATO caliber weapons at the hands of terrorist outfits. What to do onwards from here? Who would take the responsibility? Do you think there is a possibility or a chance of putting back the boots on ground once again in Afghanistan?
I think that first of all, the new resolve that has been promised by the government and by the Pakistan Army, along with all the stakeholders, along with the people, is going to coordinate on different matters, particularly the link between all the agencies, intelligence agencies, military setup, etc., and the people at large ought to be strengthened. No lapses at all in coordination. Secondly, I think that it should be a decisive blow. Number one, for those Taliban who are inside in the sleeper cells and they came back very, very unfortunately due to the wrong policy in 2000, some two years ago of the government by allowing armed about 5,000 plus Afghan Taliban there in the tribal areas and even up to Swat. And you know, they had been putting very, very rigorous conditions of Pakistan. They were not going to accept the constitution of Pakistan and they were not going to lay the arms. Now, negotiations, yes, as the Foreign Office spokesman also has indirectly, I think, meant that negotiations in the context of the fact that terrorist activities would cease forthwith and that they would abide by the constitution of Pakistan if they want to live in Pakistan. Otherwise, you see, if they keep on doing all these terrorist activities, there is no point in negotiations at all.
Okay, so Dr. Tughral Yamin, and now when we talk about the disappointment already done, the NATO caliber weapons, so what's the way forward from here when it comes to dealing with the de facto authorities in Afghanistan and the overall situation that is prevalent there?
We have to remain engaged with the Taliban who are the rulers, the de facto rulers in Kabul. And we know that our ambassador in Qatar invited them for a dinner. We don't want to disengage with them because we have also invested a lot in these Taliban who are now the rulers. But I would like to go back on the weapons. It is a clear-cut SOP in any withdrawal by any regular army that to destroy your weapons. That is the SOP. You don't leave your weapons so that the enemy can use that. That is the SOP. So this goes to show that the NATO troops, who are supposed to be very well trained, did not follow SOPs. Secondly, if you recall, in the times of the Mujahideen, Afghan Jihad, which predated the Taliban, the Stinger missiles were bought back from the people like Mullah Rockety. Enormous amounts of dollars were given to them and these things were purchased back. I think that kind of campaign can again be made to buy back these weapons. It is in the interest of the Americans. Why should their weapons be used against Pakistan or indeed against them also? So I think that could be one way of doing it.
Buying back. Okay, so that could be the one option to be considered. Buying back those NATO caliber weapons, and US should be the most concerned about those weapons, that why their weapons are being used. Okay, so that SOP that you talked about during any withdrawal of any professional army
would destroy it.
Okay, so they were not destroyed. They were left over here as they were. Right. So what does the international law specifically address this issue?
What does it say about international law? I think
is there any mechanism that could be brought into operation to deal with this particular matter when it comes to leaving such high caliber weapons back?
You see, there are UN Security Council, UN resolutions on small arms, in which all arms have to be registered. But the Afghan Taliban are not members of the United Nations. they are not recognized as a legit government. So they cannot be, if they can be made to sit in New York, and they could be part of the first committee which is on arms control, then they can be told, hey there, these are weapons which are lying there, which are in the hands of illicit groups, militant groups, please get them back. Okay. So, but for that you have to bring them into the United Nations.
What does international law say specifically about who has left those weapons there?
There's no law about it.
There's no law
about it. But
no accountability on that front?
Accountability should be of the governments whose generals left behind their weapons. I don't think any NATO general has been held accountable for the large cache of arms which have been left. I think this is criminal. This is criminal. There are procedures to how to destroy tanks, how to destroy artillery guns, how to destroy small arms. These are taught in schools of instruction, military schools of instruction. Why the hell did these people did not follow those SOPs? They were trained professional armies.
Right. Let's talk. As we already know, Dr. Khan has also alluded to the fact that the new vision, Azm-e-Istehkam, in order to eradicate the remnants of terrorism here in Pakistan, that very well the Pakistani authorities have expressed in that particular regard. When we talk about the talks with the terror group, once again, that's been ruled out completely by Pakistan's Foreign Office spokesperson. So, do we foresee, if the engagement continues, there could be a shift into the understanding of the de facto authorities in Afghanistan, and perhaps that strength with 6,000 to 6,500 that has been mentioned in this particular report by the UN could be convinced to surrender before the writ of the state?
Only if you are strong, only if you speak from a position of strength will the authorities in Afghanistan listen to you. If the authorities in Afghanistan know that you are a house divided, that your own country, that your own nation is divided about your Azm-e-Istehkam operation or vision or whatever, then they will not talk to you. They should be absolutely clear that we mean business and we are going to engage effectively, and we will defeat these people. Only then would they talk to them and say, please don't create an embarrassment for us. Otherwise, they will continue to support them.
Dr. Khan, your quick last comment regarding engaging with the Afghan Taliban to talk to them from a position of strength. What could be the possible manifestation of that dialogue with the Afghan authorities from a position of strength?
I think this is only very reasonable, and there is no other alternative, because if we start or keep on having this policy of some lighter manner and just request them and keep on requesting them that please do not allow them to attack us or the rest of the other places, this already has been tried many times over with no real result forthcoming. So therefore, I would say, yes, I agree with Dr. Tughral that from the position of strength only. And I may add up here that if you study the book of Malcolm Shaw, International Law, and Oppenheim, International Law, and many others, there is also this clear law element which permits the hot pursuit of such kind of elements if they are crossing from over the border, hot pursuit, because finally, if the question of security and sovereignty comes, it is security which prevails. So therefore, I think if Afghanistan's government also is with open mind and move towards peace, it would be not just in the interest of Pakistan, but for their trade interest, for their political interest, and finally, towards their overall recognition by the community of the world.
Dr. Adnan Khan, Foreign Affairs expert, joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much for your time. And in the studio, we were joined by Dr. Tughral Yamin, defense analyst. Dr. Yamin, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.